Welcome everybody. What's the date today?
27th.
What's that?
The 27th.
Thank you. To the June 27th meeting of the BFRW Standing Committee. Welcome and introductions. If you can take a attendance of the committee members, and then we will allow the public to introduce themselves if they wish.
Awesome. Roger Haringa.
I am here.
Todd Byerther.
Here.
Dan Young.
Here.
Angela Haupt.
Here.
Katie Sheehan. Let me just double check she's not floating in the other spot. I don't see her online today. And Tom Handy.
Here.
And with that one, we do have a quorum.
Unmute. Is there anybody from the public that would like to recognize themselves? Ariel?
Hi, Ariel Brenner, New Buildings Institute.
Thank you. Corey?
Corey Shaw, Washington Aggregates and Concrete Association for item 5.
Thank you. And Patrick?
Yes, Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. I'm here for item 4, and just FYI, I do need to leave before 10 for the energy tag meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Jeff Bradley?
Hi, Jeff Bradley with the American Wood Council.
Thank you. Seeing no others, the only introduction I wanted to make is there's two things. Number one, we have a meeting next Wednesday from 9 to noon. That's July 2nd. I recognize we are getting pushing up against a holiday. But I also know we have that meeting and a meeting on the 18th. And at the end of that, we're supposed to be done with our work. So I hope everybody can make the July 2nd meeting. And then my hope, and Patrick, kind of related to your need to leave, I'm going to, on agenda item 4, I'm really hoping that we can get through. It seems like every meeting we're close. So my hope is we can get through and finalize that. I think we've gone through a whole lot of really good conversation. So, and then we'll move on to agenda item number 5. So with that, if we could have a motion to review and approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thanks, Tom.
Second, Angela.
Thanks, Angela. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, motion passes. And moving on to agenda item number 3, review and approve the minutes from the last meeting, June 13th. I have one comment, but go ahead and go through that so that it's in the public record. Just need to get to. I emailed you, Dustin, what I.
Yeah.
So my edit that I feel is required is on agenda item number 5, the embodied carbo proposal. There's a sentence that says public comments were heard in opposition and frustrations were expressed. That is accurate in my opinion. However, I also believe there were comments in support of both the proposal and the process. So my suggested edit, it would be public comments were heard in both support and opposition of the process, and frustrations were expressed. I think it's important that we recognize both of those. So
I would move that we accept the minutes with that change.
thank you, Tom.
Second.
Thanks, Angela. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you, everybody. So agenda item number 4. Todd, I'm going to let you take this. You've kind of been leading the charge on this one. From the minutes last time, we were still trying to work through the definition of parking spaces, I think. So I think we probably need to get the proposal up and then again, let's go through the comments, questions, kind of the outstanding issues.
Okay, so where we left it, and Patrick, glad to have you here. We promised, to my memory, that we would clean it up, and Dustin, I believe you did that. So what you're looking at here is the main cleanup from what we were discussing in the last meeting is moving all the changes to red. It's we had worked through it. Some, if you remember, some of the proposed amendments to the document that was submitted, the first version, were just in blue. So we just got everything now should be in proper strikeout and underline format, and we made them red just to really emphasize them. Anything in the gray are just notes, so those can be taken out of the whack when we need it. So it's just for our purposes here. That's correct, right, Dustin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Patrick, you weren't here last time. This version, we try to blend, you know, I did my best to blend a lot of your comments and good suggestions, but also the others. So have you had a chance to look at this, and does anything jump out at you? I know there's some you know, suggestions you made that are not included in here, but I think hopefully it captures a lot of the intent you had. And what we did last time is we went through this and I think we've heard now from most of the proponents, including King County and others, on this issue. Patrick, are you elevated? Maybe not.
Yeah, I promoted him up to panelist. He should
Cool.
be available now. And we can't hear you, Patrick. I see you're unmuted, but we're not hearing your audio.
And as Patrick's coming online, the reason there's a lot of strikeouts and underlining it is because we took the added step of cleaning up definitions or adding definitions. And so when we do that, we also have to put things in italic and so forth. So there's a lot here. We get it.
But most of the edits on the definitions are really just to clarify, which in my opinion is really good, because there have always been this, well, what is an EV charger? What's EV ready?
Can you hear me now?
Confusion. So there you
Yeah.
are. Thanks,
Go ahead,
Patrick.
Patrick. And lastly, Patrick, before you start, the definitions now do align with the ICC, IECC. We suspect that while this was getting developed in Washington, is kind of aligned with timing getting developed at the national level. So I think it's just cleaner. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I think most of it looks pretty good. There's just two things that I've noticed. One, the definitions. I'm not sure if you want to use the full automobile parking spaces for the table 429.2 instead of spaces. I don't know if that matters or not. And then for the group R occupancies, my only concern is that it's confusing about what would happen if a building has both dedicated parking spaces and non-dedicated parking spaces, how that would interact.
Yeah, Patrick, this is the one we struggled with, still are struggling with. I'm not sure we have it perfected. So this is the one to focus on, is what's the best way to clean up the group R occupancies when we have a townhouse or so forth, where how do we make sure we're inclusive of something that has a garage? Do we need to put that back in there? This version right here is trying to make that first column about spaces, not about the dwelling unit like in the current version. Now, if that was better, that please somebody please raise that now. That's the one where I have questions about.
Well, I think if you use dwelling units, then it captures the townhomes. But I know sometimes larger multifamily structures will have a combination of, you know, dedicated parking spaces or reserved parking spaces for units. And then they'll have open spaces. So I'm not entirely sure how to, my concern would just be that if you have to do the normal, 10, 10, 40 for a majority of the parking spaces, but then if you have some dedicated spaces that you have to add in extra EV ready.
Angela?
Yeah, so I guess I hadn't looked really close at this dedicated spaces on site. So I guess I am wondering, does this apply? So if you have a multifamily and they have assigned parking to each unit, then no EV is required for the structure? Except for the capable or the ready. And if that is the case, how do you control that? Because they can tell us whatever they want, that yeah, these are all assigned to each unit, blah, blah, blah. But then when it comes to we final it and they sell it, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah,
Not, yeah.
if I may, Chair, that's the question I have too, Angela, because it's kind of like are these, dedicated spaces for employees? What does that mean? How is that enforceable? Is it signs?
Yeah.
Is it, what is it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Just on the permit drawings.
Yeah, the employee parking is a completely unenforceable mandate and it'll end up with no EV spaces, but that's a whole different discussion.
However, that's in the RCW, I believe, right?
That's why it's an unenforceable mandate.
Tom, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I might sound a little confused here, but is there any difference in this when they're owned versus rented?
No.
Should there be? I mean, I don't know.
Again, that's an aftermarket. And the code doesn't regulate ownership. Apartment is an apartment, basically. I mean, a dwelling is a dwelling. Versus it could be a condo, it could be a leased apartment. The code doesn't regulate that.
Okay, so some people that may rent a unit or want to rent a unit with assigned spaces would have to negotiate whether or not there's EV ready or EV possible spaces there if they've got that type of vehicle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The word dedicated spaces on site for all our occupancies is, and I guess no, we're not trying to hit single family and things like that. But one thing to also keep in, never mind, I won't get into that one. But again, yeah, these are multifamily and yeah, dedicated spaces on site is, again, dedicated to what? Dedicated to the building?
Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, remember in the IRC, I believe we have this requirement that if you have an attached garage, and if for those you might remember, there's a big debate about attached versus detached garage, and they're not to my memory, not required in detached garages. So, I mean, I think if someone can make a suggestion here, I'm not sure why that first row was, I don't know the history of it, why that was put in there, the dedicated, spaces for under 2 units for 1 or 2 units. I actually understand the private garages one more. So it could be that we retain that piece and not have the requirement for dedicated spaces. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you tell me what is, man, maybe you already answered my question. We don't know what the first row is trying to separate out. Is it for smaller duplexes? 2 dwelling units or less?
Or maybe townhouses?
Yeah, because it's presuming that someone is designing a 1 or 2 unit structure in the
Okay.
IBC, correct?
Okay. And in that case, currently it would suggest that they would have to provide one ready, EV
Right.
ready.
And the second line, dwelling units with private garages, would be inclusive of tuck under, townhouses, tuck under parking in townhouses, I would assume, or it could be some sort of private garage with more than one car, I could assume, right?
So I think though this table, all of these changes to spaces, I believe was done by Patrick. So maybe he could give us background on what he's trying to say.
I probably had more influence on that, on trying to clean up that first
So
column.
you changed it to spaces from units and
Yep.
occupancies? Oh, okay, sorry, never mind,
But,
Patrick.
but I'm not saying it was a good change.
Well, where did you get that wording?
Well, the spaces is up above, the most of this section deal with spaces, right? We've made the conscious decision that this code is based on the number of spaces provided, not, and some of Patrick's suggestions were or limited to units. Is a fair way to say it, Patrick?
I had an exception that allowed R2 to calculate based off dwelling units or parking spaces, but I
Right.
don't think that was incorporated in this.
No, and not at this time because but still could be, but the discussion was if you're parking at a factor of 2, for example, are you going to require the percentages based on the number of spaces that are provided, or cut it in half by the number of units, right? That's the discussion.
I think the provided versus required is still a separate question for us to ponder. Is that correct, Todd?
Mhm.
But I guess my question was, where did you get the language that says dedicated spaces on site or within accessory structures? I wasn't questioning changing to spaces. I was just asking where you got this language. Or was it something you made up?
My actual suggestion is to get rid of dedicated. We've already commented, or Angela's commented, that the one up above for A, E, and M occupancies is unenforceable, but it's a legislative mandate, so we have to have it in there. I don't know why we would introduce it for the R occupancies. If it's confusing and challenging and not enforceable, let's get rid of the dedicated spaces piece. That
The
would-
answer, Angela, I don't remember, so let's clean it up.
Okay.
Patrick, go ahead.
I think the intent before was to match what the IRC is doing, where if a dwelling unit has a dedicated garage or a dedicated parking space, that they just have to have one EV ready spot for that. So I think what you could do is you could have a row specifically for maybe R3 or townhouses that matches the what we have in the IRC requirement, which is one EV ready for each dwelling unit. And then just making it clear for other group R occupancies that if they have maybe assigned or individual, if they have like parking, if they have a garage for each dwelling unit or a parking space specific for each dwelling unit, that they just have to do either, I think at that scale, it might be better to, I don't know if you want to do EV ready or EV capable, but something like that. And then making it clear that they can either do that or do the requirement for the 10, 10, 40 for all spaces.
Okay, so could we either combine the first row or reintroduce the second row as now I lost it. Townhouses. Go ahead, Angela.
I was gonna say, what if we bring back that second row and have it say something like spaces within private garages serving individual dwelling units? And that one then gets you your attached garages for, say, townhouses and single family or duplexes that are within the IBC, as to only having that one. And then if you want to have it for detached structures, it would be the one above, which would be spaces within accessory structures. Actually, you could actually use it just as one, because if you don't say attached or detached, just say spaces within private garages serving individual dwelling units. And then I think that covers both of those.
And I'll just mention, we have a old fellow who might have some insight on this one in the attendees with their hand up. Mr. Micah has joined us.
Oh, excellent. He's gonna override me. This is fine.
It's, let's bring Micah into the discussion. I assume you need to make him a panelist.
Well, he can talk. Micah, you want to share your screen?
I'm on. I don't need to share a screen. Thanks everybody. I appreciate being an old guy, Dustin.
I meant to an old fellow, like not an old guy.
It's all good.
An old friend is what I meant to say, so apologies.
No, it doesn't. No, I'm totally old, so you're good. All right, I'll try to be nice. I'm not gonna say a whole lot. Roger, thanks for reaching out to me. I'm sorry, I just got back to you. I've been covered up with other stuff. So, if I gotta be honest with you, folks, I think that you're really blowing up this section. There was a whole lot of work that went in this originally, and there hasn't been, in my opinion, enough reasoning provided that says what is existing doesn't work. The original proposals that came in were just to change percentages. So I'm not sure the table you've got is any less confusing or actually more confusing when I open it and review the language compared to the existing table that's pretty simple. I think the existing table also was kind of a compromise from various proposals, and I want to say that Stoyan had put the table together with some help maybe from Kathleen, but don't quote me on that part. Roger, you asked about if we can go to 429.2, the exceptions, and I'm going to run through it real quick. I actually have to attend another meeting at 9:30. You asked why those exceptions were put in, and we talked about the dedicated employee spaces. Angela is 100% correct. You can't, as a jurisdiction, enforce employee parking spaces. A lot of examples exist for that. If you put in, say, let's just go with an M occupancy mercantile of some type. If it's going into something, maybe you build a shell building for that and somebody comes and leases a space for that, you don't know what the employee parking is ever going to be, so you're never going to get it. And I'm going to ask everybody, has any of you ever been to a place, either at A, B, or M, where you've seen identified employee parking? I mean, does it say employee parking? Does it have information that states that? I mean, it just doesn't exist. So when you go to 429.2, if somebody wants to scroll the screen to that, I'm not sharing. Roger, you asked, the employee parking spaces is in there. That's what 2.1 of the exception says.
Yes.
Says it's there. That's part of the requirement. The 2.2 was put in because of the discussion of, hey, you're never going to get employee parking. So if you do get employee parking, 2.1 covers it. If you don't, then you can go to 2.2, which is the intent of the legislation, is that all new buildings that provide parking on site get some type of EV infrastructure. And they figured that if you're not going to identify employee parking, then maybe 2.2 is an equivalent to capturing some type of employee parking. So when you strike all that, I think you're moving away from the intent of the legislation. And I think that it is captured in a pretty decent way. And I was one of the vocal opponents to this whole thing. I voted against the whole thing originally, because I don't think it should be in the building code at all. But I'm that's a boulder I'm tired of rolling uphill. So I just have some concerns that a lot of the strike through is probably more confusing and not helping. And that's where I'll leave it. I appreciate everybody's work on it. Hopefully that helps some of the history, but employee parking, you're never going to get it. So 2.2 was put there to kind of capture something for the intent of the legislation. And I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, I'll stay on for 5 more minutes. Thanks.
Thanks, Micah. It does help us understand what 2.2 is meant. So Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, I would use the word historian, Micah, but I do have questions, Micah. So thank you, because I remember some of this conversation. But what is in yellow here is I understand the logic, but I don't know that it's allowed. I mean, I don't see how the statute can be interpreted in any other way except you just need to put it in there what is said in statute and then sort it out on the enforcement
I can
side.
give some insight to that too. Just
Okay,
since you asked. The RCW states in there that this stuff shall exceed what's in the RCW. The rules, it's item 3 of the RCW, 1927-540. Item 3A, the rules adopted in this section must exceed the specific minimum requirements established under subsection 2 for all types of residential and commercial buildings. That's where you can come up with 2.2. And that was a discussion point and I think Roger's actually mentioned that in current discussions, that item there where we're talking about, are we exceeding, are we not exceeding? I think that was one of the reasons you all sent this back to, or the tag sent it back to the full council before, is what the interpretation of that section means. So I think that's how you can capture 2.2, Todd, in my opinion. And then I know that the provided, since we're on the RCW, provided comes up. If you want to scroll up just a little bit, Dustin, if you're controlling screen, item 2A, sentence 2 says where provided. This isn't where required. It's where parking is provided. 2A, sentence 2. If there's no provided, you're not doing any calculations to put in EV infrastructure. So I think Roger had that earlier in this meeting, and maybe that's come up before. That's my argument. Thanks again.
Yep.
So Micah, the interpretation is if you're providing more than what the code requires, then you would calculate it on those that you are providing.
Absolutely. That would be my interpretation as well.
And that's why we focus on spaces, right?
Go ahead, Todd.
So Micah, okay, let's move on since you only got a couple of minutes from the 2.2. If you go back to the table, why and how was there an exception for under nine or fewer spaces? Not required. How was that justified 3 years ago?
That one I may have to go back and do a little more research on, Todd. I really don't remember that one off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry.
Then you know what
question.
yeah, everyone understands the question, right? Like how can we make an exception anywhere in this table to the statute? Yeah. Okay, thanks. Those are my main things. And then maybe one last thing on the group R, since you did participate in the IRC version of this, right? And is my memory correct? If you have a garage attached, then you have to do the EV ready.
Correct. That was the intention. Is there's a lot of folks that says, well, what if I've got a garage, but it's not for parking? It's like a shop or something.
Right.
So they didn't want to get into that debate. I mean, the whole thing was a debate anyway. I think there's I think there was still a pending lawsuit on that. Patrick, maybe that's up to you on that one. I think that was one of the areas they indicated we exceeded our authority, and that the legislation originally only struck out R3 occupancies, and the full council decided to put EV infrastructure into the 1 and 2 family dwellings, saying that was the intent. Maybe, but a 1 and 2 family dwelling in the IRC is not an R3 occupancy, because occupancy classifications don't exist in the residential code.
Right.
So just striking that, there's no intent there. Now, if you build a 1 or 2 family out of the building code as an R3, then that's different. But again, that was one I lost on, because that's just how it goes.
Well, I think R3 was just delayed for the first cycle. I think we're into it now.
Well, it was delayed. Well, it was accepted out. In other words, it was R3s were an exception to the legislation originally. They modified the legislation to strike that R3, pretty much that all occupancy of the building code would need EV infrastructure. But some folks took that to mean that the 1 and 2 family also has to have them. So there is now EV infrastructure in the 1 and 2 family. But again, don't need to go backwards on that. I'll just kind of give you the history on discussions.
Thanks.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with regard to the 9 or fewer, I think the 10% of total spaces was determined first. And then the 9 or fewer, you would get, fractions of 10%, fractions of a space. And so, even if you had like 3 spaces, 10% would be 0.3. But if you did 1 space to round it up to the first whole number, that'd be 33%. So I think that's why that was done.
Although there's also language that you're supposed to round up.
Right below there, the greater of 1 parking space or 10%, right?
Can you remind me, Todd, do BFHI or S occupancies, are they considered commercial?
Yes, right?
They're considered non-residential.
Okay, I'm just going back, I pulled up the RCW and the 3A section that Micah talked about.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I guess my question, I was wondering, did someone do it on a small business justification or something? That's the part we couldn't unpack, why that decision was made.
I think it may go along with like accessible parking, only I mean accessible is I think if you have 3 or less spaces, you don't have to, you have to size a space for accessibility, but you don't sign it or mark it because you don't want to take away one of the few spaces as far as being able to be used, which EV is along the same lines that once you have the equipment and you sign it, you can only park or you can only use it if you're actively charging. So it effectively takes away a parking stall. So, I mean, I would assume that's sort of where it goes with, is trying for like small business.
Well, I guess the question, sorry to just keep jumping in here, but is that a substantial change that we shouldn't be considering right now anyway? I mean, to me, that whole line should be just removed, 9 or fewer spaces, but we don't have a petition or proposal for that, so.
Well, it was part of the proposal that was sent to us, right?
I wanted to go back, we had 3 proposals. At least 2 of them only really changed the percentages on the bottom row. And then the third one, I don't remember exactly if there were some more details, although Patrick had some markouts up above as well, and that's been a long time ago. I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the debate we had really was around the 10 and 40, the 10, 10, 40. Most of our other work is just trying to clean it up. And the recommendation to align the definitions with current code, which I think is a really good move forward and something that this committee should do. But I don't know about, I don't think it should be our intent to make changes to this substantive, if I can say that word, changes beyond the 10, 10, 40. It really should just be improving and aligning the table. And I don't know if Micah's still on. I think Micah understood the old table. So he felt like it was simple. I'm not sure other people necessarily agreed. And what we've been trying to do is to clean it up. Like, is it spaces, or I think putting it on spaces defining it as number of spaces is a great step forward.
And Mike is no longer with us.
Yeah.
I think the old table was comfortable. I think we all are used to it. We know how to use it. We know how to read it. This one is going to take a bit to wrap our heads around. And don't worry, people will let us know when it's confusing and they ask for interpretations.
Well, so where do we want to go? I feel like getting rid of, in the first row of the group R, getting rid of the dedicated would be positive, because I think that's confusing, and I don't know, we've heard from a couple people that it's not really enforceable.
I think we can get rid of that whole first row under R. I think the second row covers it then for both attached and detached private garages that are serving an individual dwelling unit.
I also, where would be the case that a 1 or 2 dwelling unit building would be built under the IBC?
It's 4 stories. IRC only covers structures up to 3 stories.
Does that ever happen? I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
1 and 2 story, that's 4 story, 1 and, okay.
4-story townhouses. Yeah, 4-story single family. Yeah, they get kicked into the IBC, which, yeah, the big
Okay.
deal is that they're automatically sprinklered no matter what the jurisdiction says or thing
Yeah.
is, and that's the big difference. And then it's
Okay.
the structural. Yeah. It definitely happens, especially for townhouses.
There's a hand up in the attendees.
Who is it?
It's Ken Brulette.
And
Hey, Ken, go ahead.
I just want to know, when you get off of this, if we can go back to the definitions for alignment, but I'll wait until you want to do that.
Okay, so Angela, if we're gonna get rid of the top row and just go with the second row, do we not, under the EV required, have 1 for each dwelling unit? You're on mute.
we have an EV ready for each dwelling
Yeah,
unit, just like
yeah.
that line said. I'm saying uncross all the way across it, which is the not required for the space.
I gotcha, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the 3 columns need to be uncrossed.
Yes.
And,
That
okay,
whole row, yeah.
okay. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, that was actually my question. If they're all crossed out, then why not cross the whole line out? But we got it.
Okay, Patrick?
It seems like this may be a case where we're not creating an improvement in the understandability of the code when it comes to the changes in this table. So perhaps we just go back to the current language and just shift the numbers, other than any little minor definition change, like the changing of EV charging stations to EVSE.
That is a suggestion. Angela, you're in enforcement.
I'm trying to pull up the old table because now I can't even
It's been
remember
a
what it
while
looks
since I've
like.
looked at the old table and tracked through.
Can you scroll
how
up a little bit, Dustin? Yeah, because I'm fine either way. I'm not offended if but we did change the title of the name. That was part of it. That goes along with the definitions. It would just it would take occupant. It would go back to occupancy instead of calling the number of spaces.
Okay.
Well, I like the idea of going into, and I don't know, I'm not an enforcement, so it just makes more sense to me to be calculating it on parking spaces.
Yeah, I mean, you go by section. You have the different occupancies. And the first column is just spaces, and then I'm fine if you want to go back on the residential side to just the way it was written. That's fine.
So hold it there for a second. I'm just trying to compare what.
We consistently crossed out parking in the table and in the language in the rest of the section. So that was I'd asked to keep that. And then the definitions are reflected in the top row.
So, okay, and so here's the question: the changes we made with the AEM and the BFHIS occupancies from the original. are to split them apart so that the A and M only apply to employee spaces and to add that 9 or fewer.
Yeah, all it's doing is getting rid of the exception up above and putting it in the table.
Right.
But then we got a debate about the 1 in 200 and how you would address that. If that,
So that's kind of where I was going back to was, do we just want to go back to and leave the exceptions, the 2 exceptions, and then leave the simple table just as it is here with the 10, 10, 45 for the Rs? See what I mean?
Yep.
Instead of more
Or-
of an if this, then that, if this, then that.
yeah, or you keep this the first column as space, because I think it's confusing where that's occupancies. It's fine. You could do it that way.
You could still change this to be parking spaces. You could, because can you do a side by side of, oh no, I have the other one, just a minute. I'm gonna pull it up on mine. So let me see. So you could do all spaces. So all spaces for group A, B, blah, blah, blah occupancies. And then or you could just, I mean, even if you just change the word occupancy from that column title and put automobile parking spaces, then it's inferred that it's spaces for this group of occupancies, this group of occupancies. So it's not basing it. So yeah, because this is never basing it on the number of dwellings or anything like that. It is basing it on the occupancies. It's just because the other ones are actually your number of parking spaces. Patrick, maybe you have something more organized to say than I am.
Patrick, go ahead.
FYI, the IECC appendix has it, their table has it based off occupancy. So it has the occupancy on the first column and then the required percentage for each type of space.
And again, even this new table is still based on occupancy. You're just adding language to say spaces for that occupancy. But I guess when you actually put them side by side, it's already basing it on the number of spaces.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have to refer back to what is the occupancy of the structure to figure out where the percentages are. So I think Micah's right. I think the original table, I think it's fine.
I'm leaning that direction too.
Now that I have them, yeah, side by side and I'm looking at it again. Yeah.
So I'm okay with that too. And then we would just maintain striking the word parking in the titles in the first row, and then in the group A, B, E, F, so on. So it just says 10% of total spaces.
That's
Right.
fine.
Okay.
Can you remind me why we struck the word parking? Is spaces just, I mean, space could be anything, but why did we do that?
All right, let's go back up the definitions. It's a good question,
Yeah.
Tom.
Because EV ready spaces aren't parking spaces. They are not to park in. They are to charge. That was part of the debate between the definition of a parking space is something you leave your car in, you stay indefinitely and go do your thing. The EV spaces are for actively charging. And then you are supposed to move your vehicle and go to a parking space if you need a prolonged period of time. I believe it comes down to definition.
So if you had assigned spaces, then
Mhm.
you would be in conflict with it. Sorry.
That's
And here we
actually,
go again, right? Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I'm not getting into that. Actually, I think if they're assigned spaces and they're private, they wouldn't be signed. As far as EV parking, it's a whole thing. Never mind.
Ken, we're back up to the definitions. Do you want to throw your question or comment into?
Sure. So I understand that you're taking the definitions from Appendix RE, and to have them in conflict with the National Electrical Code. I think that you guys have already made that decision. But the one definition, raceway, that you're referencing is coming from the National Electrical Code. That's not a verbatim definition, as you guys have indicated. So you might want to take a look at that.
That's correct, Ken, and that's on purpose, because we've defined raceway as just conduit, not wire. Is that the difference, Ken? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's just the rationale of it, I think, is incorrect. I don't think it aligns. So they make a statement that it aligns. I would have to disagree that it does not align.
You're correct on that.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of that rationale, because it is different. It's amended from that.
And then I'm just not too sure why the decision was made to go along with the appendix definitions versus the National Electrical Code definitions, if that was purposeful also. Because there is a conflict. There's a difference between the National Electrical Code definitions in a few of these versus the appendix definitions. I didn't know if that was purposeful or not.
Can you give an example, Ken?
Sure. The EVSE, electrical vehicle supply equipment, that's a different definition than what's in the National Electrical Code. I just didn't know if that was a purposeful thing, why it was done. I know that it's the difference is, and read it verbatim out of the electrical code. And the reason I get with that, just because it's referenced, electrical codes, like the 23 edition is referenced in the building code and fire code. So we're just causing a little bit of confusion. But let me see. So the electrical vehicle supply equipment in the National Electrical Code says equipment for plug-in charging, comma, including the ungrounded, comma, grounded, comma, and equipment grounding conductors, comma, and the electrical vehicle connectors, comma, attachment plugs, comma, personal protection system, comma, and all other fittings, comma, devices, comma, power outlets, comma, or apparatus installed specifically for the purpose of transferring energy between the premises, wiring, and electrical vehicle. That was a new definition that was put in the 2023 National Electrical Code, which is referenced in the building code. So I just wondering if anybody even looked into that or not.
So Ken, the rationale says it aligns with 2024 IECC Appendix RE. So
which it does.
So there is a conflict out there between those two reference documents.
Yes, and I just didn't know if you guys knew that there was a conflict between the two. So I was just making you aware of it. Yeah. That's all I have. Thanks.
And I'm not, so we need to make a decision. And there is the code hierarchy, I think, an appendix versus an electrical code that is actually adopted, I think, that question, but I like the clarity that we had, but Todd, go ahead.
No, I think it's a persuasive argument that we should look into that and probably try to line electrical if it makes sense. Yeah.
Go ahead, Angela.
So I have a question on the raceway definition. Why did we make a conscious decision to just make up our own?
No, we didn't do that. It was more based off our discussion of how we, as a state, do define the capable. That we were.
Well, but the capable is that you need to provide a raceway that is compliant with the electrical code in order to run, basically to just put the wire in and run it. So I guess that's my question is if why wouldn't we match what the electrical code is going to require? I mean, is there, and I don't know, Ken, if you have that one pulled up, but with our definition, would this actually even be legal to just put wire in and run it?
Yeah, I do have all of the NFPA 70 loaded up right now on my screen that shows the different definitions of raceway. So if you wanted to, I can share that.
I'm just curious if what we have, I don't know. Yeah.
Can you let Ken share?
Yeah, I just gave him the promotion request. He's got to click it and it'll take a couple seconds.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just don't want to get into a place where we're allowing them to, put something in and then after the fact, it's like, oh wait, you'd have to upgrade it anyway.
That's certainly not the intent.
Right.
Patrick, go ahead while we're.
Even if, I mean, in my opinion, the definitions are pretty close between the electrical code and the IECC definitions. But if you want to match the raceway definition for the electrical code, it self-references that code. So you're still going to have to amend it.
Okay, so I mean, it is basically.
And then there's some further down. If you were just talking about metal raceway, Todd. So I don't know if you wanted to look at the other.
No, I'm not opposed. If this is a better definition and aligns.
So I was just thinking that again, if you're changing, if you're looking for specific raceway type, they have different types in the electrical code that you just might have wanted to look at a little bit more closely to align.
So it looks like maybe we took the definition, but then we expanded it a little bit to just allow for the different materials. That.
What?
Maybe it's probably in the lesson.
Oh.
As much as I wanted to get to a final solution, there's enough changes to this. I am going to make a recommendation so that we can move on. I have a summary that we want to keep the definitions, but we do need to go back and double check their alignment with the electrical code versus the IECC code. And
NFPA, what we have on the screen here, 70.
Yes. And go back to the old table and exceptions other than changing it to the 10-10-40.
And striking the parking.
And striking the parking. I think, Todd, if you're kind of running with this, and or Dustin, if we can get that version and get it posted so everybody can read it, and then my hope is get it posted. So, and Patrick, if you can't make the next meeting on July 2nd, fine, but let's get it so that you can have, offer comments. But I think we all need to look at, okay, we've talked about it. I think we're in agreement. Let's get a final version and go through that. And hopefully do a final pass to move it back up to the building code, the SBCC next week. Does that sound like a plan?
Are you wrapping up our conversation on this proposal?
I'm trying to, but if you have other, go ahead. I'm heading that direction, Angela, but.
I mean, but I would really like to discuss required versus provided.
Okay.
I think it's, the IBC doesn't require parking anywhere. It has no minimum parking requirement. Everywhere else we're accessible. It says where parking is provided. Because part of the problem is by saying required, I don't necessarily think the state is doing what they intended, or we're not doing what they intended by saying provided. Because places like actually, a growing number are starting to go to market-driven parking, which means even their zoning codes have 0 parking requirements. Spokane Valley has no parking requirements in their zoning code anymore. It is all whatever the developer feels is necessary for the market, which means there are 0 EV parking spaces required anywhere in new construction for anything in Spokane Valley, because there is no required parking. And then there's always the debate, who's requiring it and what is, required as far as, so you're going off of, they need to provide 100 spaces, they provide 300 spaces, you're going only off of the 100. And again, there's nothing in here that says what requirement you're going off of. And again, the I codes have no minimum required parking.
So we had one opinion from Micah that it is provided,
And it should be provided.
the RCW. Angela agrees with that. But are you suggesting, Angela, that is different from what the current code is?
What this says, yes. And I believe it is what I think the current code actually says required. It's in, if you go 429.2. And yeah, it's charging infrastructure percentages of table 429.2 shall be applied to the number of spaces required for each occupancy. And yeah, it's something that we hit in enforcement where it's like, okay, I've got a mixed occupancy building.
Yeah.
What amount is required for each of the occupancies? Where are they assigned? So, I think it should absolutely be provided. Is my opinion.
Well,
I think Patrick had his hand up too.
okay, yeah, sorry, I had something over your hand, Patrick. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just got to run, but I just wanted to say thank you. I think I'll be able to attend the next meeting, and I'll check to see the uploaded changes to the EV charging page. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I agreed. I thought that was implied, and if I think it's editorial if we were to change required to provided. I think that was at least how I understood it. And if there's a loophole in there, I think that's what Angela you're calling out, right?
Well, I mean, it's not a loophole. It's just a matter of the growing trend of, instead of requiring parking just based on arbitrary calculations, they're doing market driven, which means there's 0.
No, I agree. And Spokane has that too. Now, does anyone disagree that the intent of the legislation is for provided?
From my reading and the explanation I've got, it is supposed to be provided.
Okay. So I would say we will clean that up too in there, and if everyone's in agreement, that's what it means.
What I think is we will vote on. I think this committee agrees with that. I think we will get comments. That sounds like a big change, but that's a big change from what is currently happening. But that's the reason we go through the public comment and the CR 102, and but I think that this does align, and with that change, I would like to have a rationale comment like we have. I think that in our opinion, that aligns with the RCW, and I certainly agree with that. So Todd, if you can go ahead and take charge of working with Dustin to get a version that makes the changes that we just talked about. Okay. And again, my hope is we can walk through it. We've talked about the issues. We can walk through it next meeting and vote yea or nay to send that on up to the State Building Code Council. Any other comments on agenda item 4? All right. Agenda item number 5. I think what I'd like to do, I certainly want to give everybody a break, but what I would like to do is I asked Dustin to kind of prepare. We asked for, and there were documents, comments submitted. by various people. What I would like to do, and I'm hoping, I see Corey and I see Ariel, I gotta double check. What I'd like to do is to give the people that made, what I'd like to do is have Dustin go through the various comments that were submitted. My hope is to drill, what I want to do is allow the people that submitted them to kind of present their ideas. We have them as letters. But certainly if they want to expand on it or provide more context, I want to give them the opportunity to do that. My hope then is to separate the discussion items into technical discussion items and more general. Some of the comments kind of contain both. The more general ones I think we can discuss, but I also want to focus us on the technical, because again, at the end of the day, we have to come up with a technical, this group would have the ability to say, let's kill this proposal as one person from the public suggests it. If we could certainly entertain that. But my hope is, I don't know that would be, I don't know how people would feel about that, but what I would like to do is to start focusing on the technical aspects. So I think with that, Dustin, if you could go through and kind of summarize the various comments that were submitted, and first go through just a summary, and then I think, Corey, I would ask you to, once Dustin has gone through them, if you can kind of summarize and give us your thoughts on the proposal or the comment letter that you sent in. That would be great.
All right, so what I'll do is I'll share these as I go through them. They're all posted to the meeting page, what I'm going to discuss today, and I've got a very brief summary kind of statement for each one of our letters that we've received. Let me bring this over so we can all see where I'm clicking on this stuff. There's two that aren't as in order as I would like them, just because of the naming conventions. They were alphabetical when we got them posted. But the first one I was going to talk about is the Carbon Leadership Forum letter. This one is in support of our proposal work and continuing that one going down. With this letter, they address some of the comments that we've heard in opposition to the work and frustration with the process so far. Along with this letter, they did submit a code proposal update here, where we have some change to the title of Q103 and also in the table of Q103.3.1. I will give them a chance to go over that when we get to that part of this one. So that's the high level overview of what we have from the Carbon Leadership Forum on this one. Coming up next, we have the BLCA pathway document that was prepared by Todd. This one, we just have some cleanup with track changes in here based on comments received. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the correct one. It's not the correct one. Hold on.
I don't see any shares if you're sharing.
Oh, I'm clicking through stuff on my screen without sharing, so I apologize on that one. Give me one moment. Okay. Let me clean this up just a little bit. All right, so here's the BFRW doc that was presented by Todd with cleanups and track changes. I don't have a good summary of what all these changes are in here, just that they are all shown in red. And most of this cleanup is based on feedback and discussion we've had at our meetings. Coming up next, we have the New Buildings Institute comment letter here. Summarizing this one is in support of continued work and offers some high-level suggestions based on recent commentary. And one of the prime things, they continue to urge the BFRW to maintain the three pathways method that's been lined out in the proposal that we've been looking at. Coming up next, we have the coalition letter. So this one comes from a several different entities, but in their, I'm just going to call it the coalition letter. The main one, this one's in opposition to the adoption of embodied carbon provisions. And in here, they express some specific concerns for what's going on. And we'll have an opportunity to hear from those folks coming up here shortly. And then the last one I have on here is from AISC. That is the American Institute of Steel Construction. They are aware of what we've got going on, and they have been working with the New Buildings Institute. But the prime content of this comment letter is that due to the timing of the submission of the New Building Institute proposal, they don't have some of the comments incorporated from AISC in the proposal. And so this letter does contain some of those suggested revisions to the table T103.3.1. And we'll let them kind of outline some of this. And this is Max Putchell. He's online today as well. And so with that, that's all the comment letters we received in between the last meeting and now. And happy to turn it back over to you, Roger.
Okay, now sorry, I'm trying to get to my tab. It has the information I want as well. So I'm trying to be respectful that we are not prioritizing one group over the other. So I'm actually going to go by the order that it is listed on the website. And so I don't know if there's anybody from the CLF who is here. I know Jordan reached out to me and said he was not going to be able to make it, but he wasn't sure. If there's anybody from CLF, could you raise your hand? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay. You can read the letter, it's published. I just wanted to give people the opportunity to describe further. The next one is Todd, your whole building LCA pathway. Do you can you summarize for it? I mean, Dustin hit it, but can you just give us a high level of what your proposal is suggesting?
It would simply strike the material cap and the reuse sections.
Okay, so you're doing it, your comments are just that you include a whole building LCA and you get rid of the other two options.
Yep.
Okay. Next is NBI. I think we've seen somebody.
Hi, yeah, this is Ariel. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep my comments short. I tried to keep our notes a bit high level and just to provide a little direction on what we would be supportive of, kind of reacting to the more recent conversations that have been happening. Really three key points in our letter. One is we were hearing some questions last time about whether the IBC is the right place for embodied carbon provisions and whether they're within scope of this document. We would argue, yes, the purpose statement mentions health, safety, and welfare, and specifically through the use of minimum performance standards for the construction and construction materials specifically. So we would argue that that is all within scope and elaborate on that more in our statement. The second piece is, as Dustin mentioned, we would urge preservation of all three compliance pathways. We find in our conversations that that framework is much more broadly preferred by project teams and industry because it provides flexibility for compliance. our third piece is just calling out some of the other submitted comments and proposed changes, including those from AASC and Northwest Concrete Masonry Association, as well as Carbon Leadership Forum. We would support the proposed changes that all of those organizations have submitted. And yeah, if I can elaborate on any of those, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. So Corey, I know that the letter is a coalition letter, but I believe you signed, so if you'd like to present, talk about. I think Corey is.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Roger, and thanks everybody for giving me an opportunity to speak. We would disagree with NBI's take that embodied carbon reduction goals belong in the health and safety lane. We're not saying that they don't belong in some sort of a structured process. California has a separate chapter that handles it based on the speed of innovation and the changes that are happening with materials across the globe. It makes it challenging to pigeonhole or fit it into a process that's structured and is delayed sometimes as the building code can be. So that was one of our main concerns, that there could be other avenues to achieve these without it running through this. So one of the reasons why we were concerned about it and asking that this process stop is there is still some lack of understanding in how the EPTs across materials are calculated and or considered with regard to transportation and other aspects. And that 1282 working group is currently looking at that for Washington. And we think that data needs to be presented and represented and considered before we roll out with any pathways or codes. So our first recommendation was that you would refer to our letter on June 12th and just stop this until 1282 is able to complete its work. And then through legislation and or another body or this body, we can consider how we move forward. Second, if you decline to do that, we did want to support the WBLCA pathway that Todd had worked on and presented, but that we would ask that there be a consideration in there for the ASTM E2921 standard practice for whole building life cycle calculations for use of whole building code standards and rating systems. So we did provide that in there. We did ask that be included. And if there's not a one, or if you're not looking at option 1 or 2, in the prescriptive approach, we have concerns with the local jurisdictions' understanding and education behind this topic and the impact to industries that could happen like down the stream. Like this would butt up against, say, like a precaster or a final product individual when it could potentially narrow or limit their ability to select a product or material based on the pathways. So we ask that the local jurisdiction be required to do an assessment, and we outlined how they could do that before they could adopt this. So it would be like, you have to understand this, you have to understand what the impacts are going to be before you can do this. And if you can meet these certain parameters, then we think, okay, yeah, you should be able to sign off on it. So we did line that out. I know Matt Hink is on the call from Cal Portland. This was kind of his suggestion based on his experience with California and the challenges that they're having with their green code. So he is here to answer any questions further on that. But so we did give you 3 options, and we're still wanting to work with you and be behind it. So I see Matt's been promoted. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that. If you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them, but we did have a coalition, and we have been talking with Steel as well.
Corey, will you clarify something for me? 1282 you mentioned, and I know it's been referenced, and I think that that's all right. There's a working group. That is that a Senate? Is that an RCW?
So it was a gross substitute House Bill 1282 that was passed out of legislation in 2024. And and it was the Buy Clean, Buy Fair.
Okay,
We
okay.
worked really hard on that group. So it is the group that was designated by legislature
Yeah,
to Commerce, right? So Commerce is evaluating the EPDs.
yeah, I'm aware. I it gets called different things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm always trying to make sure I'm thinking of the right one when it gets referenced.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that.
If there's somebody from Cal Portland that would like to add to that, I'm happy to. Is it Matt Hink? Matthew Hink?
Yep. I
Sure.
may have a minute of the floor. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Yes.
Appreciate everyone's comments. I think Corey did a fine job outlining our first two items in our letter approach that we are hoping you'll follow. In regards to item 3, you know, we are proposing changes if you choose to proceed with 3 pathways. Our biggest concern has been that it'll limit the number of competitors in the marketplace. And we have seen this in practice in the Seattle metro area where there are jobs that some contractors cannot bid on because of embodied carbon restrictions. And so that is not good for the marketplace. And when you only have a very small number of producers in a region, you do not want to limit the number of producers that can supply jobs in the marketplace. So that is our biggest concern, is we want to make sure that the code allows the majority of the producers in the region to always be able to work on jobs. And so what we are proposing is a safeguard here that basically says that before an adopting municipality would adopt this code, they would assess the suppliers in their marketplace to ensure that at least 75% of them can meet the embodied carbon standards that they are proposing to adopt. So that provides you a safeguard to make sure that you maintain competition in the marketplace. The second point that we're making is that, and we've expressed this all along, is that especially for concrete, there are regional differences across the state that are driven by primarily the source of aggregates and sand that are available in the marketplace. So if you have less durable sands and gravel, you need more cement to achieve the same strength output. So, for example, my company operates in the metro Seattle region, but we also operate down by Vancouver. And for the same mix that we produce in Seattle compared to down there, we use 20% more cement to get strength. So if you have one standard that you forced to apply across the whole state, you cannot take into account these geological differences. So our proposal is that the adopting council must do a survey of the area that they're in. And my suggestion was at a minimum, the producers in their physical area up to 3 times the geographic area of the community. So that's the second point. We also are very concerned because we rely on a global supply of cement alternatives into our marketplace to meet the lower carbon standards. That's how it's done. When you add SCMs, they account for basically zero embodied carbon. Doing the math, that's how you get the number down in your concrete. So there are times when these materials just aren't available commercially. Slag cement is a globally constrained commodity. So it is not always available into the marketplace. Fly ash is, of course, we've already talked about this, less and less available. So there needs to be times when we bid a job and we start a job a year later, we may not have access to the SCMs. So that's a concern that we have. And finally, we have concerns that the code does not provide any provisions for what if a contractor chooses the prescriptive pathway or the whole building life cycle pathway and they don't meet the reduction targets. What is the remedy? And we are suggesting that there needs to be some consideration of that, but we would ask that not be restricted to not requiring the removal of the material from the project. I think that'd be counterproductive. So those are the 4 points. Any questions? I'll take them. Otherwise, appreciate the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And Max, I believe from AISC.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Pardon me, I'm a little mobile here at a Zero Carbon Summit here in Boulder. But yeah, so I think the co-committee, you've seen the letter that we submitted up on the thing, and I guess I will just summarize it briefly by saying that AISC believes that there's quite a lot in this proposal to comment on and probably could be refined, but we decided for the sake of simplicity that we just wanted to focus on 2 items in particular. That are priorities for us and are also codified in some of the guidance we published already for Buy Clean policy authors. And they're summarized in the letter, but I'll say it right here as well. One is just to strike the 3 lines within the materials table for fabricated steel and keep the 3 lines for unfabricated steel. That is simply a matter of aligning with current practice in the proper LCA scope for where these numbers will be judged by. That's where steel EPDs are moving into the future. It's what our current PCR that was just released a couple months ago has also codified. So it's a matter of consistency and will help implementation if this does pass. And then the second item is that if something like this were to occur, it's very important that all relevant structural materials used in a similar function are included in this bill on a equal playing field. And right now, there's very good coverage for steel products. There's very good coverage for concrete products, but the wood products are incomplete. It's missing CLT and a few others, some primary structural materials from that industry. The reason is because NBI used the covered products list based on the 2023 CLF carbon material baselines report, which had also omitted those products due to lack of data. We do have data for that. NBI has worked with CLF in order to have numbers. In addition, the CLF 2025 material baseline reports includes that. So it'd be really critical that all materials are represented in this proposal. If those 2 things can happen, which I think are both reasonable and fair, then AISC is willing to remove our objection at this time. Thanks.
Thanks, Max. Okay, so those are the comments that we have to discuss. I wanted to kind of bring it back to the committee, although this may be a little bit out of order, but I see Representative Dewar on. I'm going to give her an opportunity to make a comment if she would like.
Thank you.
As the author of what, Buy Clean, Buy Fair, and other.
Thank you so much, Roger. Thanks everyone who's here providing really important comment. I do believe that it makes for a better end product when we have more voices rather than fewer. I did want to comment on the local government study. I understand the reasoning behind asking for that, but I just think it's not really possible. Local governments don't have the resources to be able to do that. So in as much as we can find other ways to make that get at the solving the problem without putting it on local governments who don't have the resources to do those kinds of studies, I'm in favor of that. I think as one of the remedies I think that might help is having performance specs rather than prescriptive specs where possible. And I do think having a carbon budget rather than maybe the other options could be part of the solution, as well as just reusing existing buildings. Like that's why there are 3 pathways, because we're not trying to prescribe which pathway or how to get to the end result. We're trying to provide options. At least that's what my bill, my embodied carbon bill does. That has not made it out of the legislature, to be clear, but that's where my thinking is and where I'm trying to bring the legislation. And as the author of 1282, I don't think that this appendix works against that work group. And I think we need to keep moving the needle. At best, we can address this in the 2027 code, and that's being really optimistic. So I don't think we can afford to wait for that work group to finish all of their work to move forward. So that would be my ask. And other than that, thank you all for being here, and I hope that you'll continue to engage with me over the interim on the embodied carbon bill. Thanks.
Thank you. So what I would like to do, as I mentioned, there are comments, I'm actually going directly to the coalition letter where they request this proposal cease to proceed any farther. I think what I would ask the committee to consider, do we think as a committee that this proposal should continue to move forward and we should have discussions on technical aspects? So I actually want to give the opportunity, if somebody on the committee feels like, you know what, we should just cease to proceed any further. I want to get that out there and offer that. Okay. Then what I would like to do, well, first off, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break. We've been going for an hour and a half and we've got an hour and a half left. So I'm going to soon ask for, or I'm going to call for a 5-minute break. Coming back at 10:32. And then I want to start getting into the technical comments of that have been offered and suggested. So we will talk to everybody in 5 minutes. Sorry, I am muted. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, when you asked that question earlier about whether or not we think, any of us thought that this should not go forward, I couldn't answer that without this 5-minute break very accurately here. So I'm glad we did that. My personal view is that this isn't ready to be in code. I think that, Representative Dewar touched on something briefly that I really believe in too, is that we need to look at a full carbon budget for these projects, or we're missing, a lot of what we should be looking at. And I think that full carbon budget ought to really include the embodied carbon in the energy we use to power these buildings. And yes, the energy carbon footprint may change over time, but then so will the equipment that we put in these buildings that use that energy. And so I think that's kind of a fluid thing that we all need to take into account, because if we don't take into account the embodied carbon in the energy, which is very great over time, or it can be, then we're really missing a big part of the picture. And so I think that with that in mind, from my perspective, this isn't complete enough to be in code yet and be attached to tables that change a lot of different other things. So,
and I was, during my 5-minute break, I was actually thinking of giving, I know I kind of threw that on everybody. So if there are other folks that want to comment from the committee, I would be happy to, I'm happy to have a more broad discussion about it. Tom, my response at the 5,000 foot level is the operational energy is significantly managed by the energy code. This embodied carbon, which I will remind everybody is an appendix, it's may or may not be adopted by any government agencies over the next code cycle, is the first attempt to try to bring the embodied carbon question into the energy reduction. So Todd, go ahead.
Tom, if you want to respond to that first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't agree that it's adequately managed in the energy code. You know, that's my whole point, is because the energy code has determined that site energy is the only value, you know, valid measurement of energy. But site energy doesn't, you know, evaluate embodied carbon in that energy at all. So that's the whole point of my comments. So.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that too, because I agree, Tom. You know, the way our energy code is, it is energy. It's not emissions or carbon on purpose, for the most part. So given a counter there to whether it belongs in the code, I do think a framework belongs in the code, and I've come to believe it belongs in the building code. I know there's some references in those letters and some arguments that it should be a whole separate green code. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. That's a whole different animal that hasn't been proposed by external petition or by the legislature, you know, like California. And I think we have specific characteristics of our state, policies in particular on emissions. So CETA, Clean Energy Transformation Act, Clean Building Act, these things have to be very coordinated. So I do have one hope, and I want to be clear, the whole building LCA proposal that I helped draft in there was not my, it's taking the existing petition as drawn and stripping some things out. That's not how I would write it. I have gone through the exercise of trying to better understand, you know, and write actual section of the code, what that would look like, with the idea that to present it to the legislature and try to have a very coordinated effort on this. So that's the question in my mind right now, is what could and should we do right now to help the legislature, help Commerce on their efforts on the clean building, I'm sorry, on Buy Clean, Buy Fair, and remind everyone, I am on that work group, and that group is primarily helping the state understand what EPDs on products are and help Commerce create a database. That's only the first step. Now, the second step in a report next year from that group will be some policy recommendations. But it is pretty focused just on that A1 through A3 right now. It's not, the scope is not creeping outside of that at this point. So I think that's a good contribution, and I think there is a necessity for the council to consider what we can contribute. But I'm sorry, one last thing to conclude on that. That's a different comment or question than saying we are putting some sort of regulatory piece in this. So where I get concerned about this is how certain targets are being proposed, whether it's absolute targets, like in the whole building where it was 90% of 500, or if we're starting to compare against in the material caps baselines and then trying to choose some sort of percentage reduction. So that's where I start to get concerned how those are being established, because pulling this all back to what Tom just said, we have step down emissions that are going to happen, and what are we proposing as a roadmap over 5, 10, 20, 60 years to start to align targets that could be put in the code with targets that are already mandated in policy outside of what the building code's covered. So I asked more questions there than you gave opinions, so thanks.
Okay, are there other comments? I have, well, my opinion, Tom, about whether it belongs in the code or not is, and actually my in the discussion at the full council level about site energy versus what's the term for the other, site versus source. the building code is about projects. It's all based on projects. And so I think that this, this is about a project level calculation for embodied carbon. So I think that it does belong in the building code. But I understand there are varying opinions on it. I'm going to offer any other comments, and then I was going to move us on to the next topic. And Todd, your proposal, what I would just like to focus on, your proposal has a bunch of edits, editorial crossouts, definition edits. But the big topic or the big change on your proposal, I believe, is to get rid of 2 of the pathways and to just go to a whole building life cycle assessment pathway. That was supported in the coalition letter as their option 2. So I think that we should have a conversation about that, and I would ask for your argument as to why you think that we should not include the product specific pathway or the maintaining 50% reuse of the building pathway.
Sure. And again, I'd prefer to not call it my proposal. I'm trying to capture
the proposal you submitted.
Amending for stakeholders and the groups that I'm talking to based off of the petition in front of us. So I would write a very different proposal if but it would be based on LCA. And LCA can be at different scales. It doesn't have to be whole building LCA. You can, if the goal, and it is to reduce total emissions, then we're conducting LCAs across the supply chain. And so even a discussion like from Mr. Puchel from ASE, like that discussion between fabricated and unfabricated, like those are at different stages along the supply chain. And so coming to high level, why focus on whole building LCA? Because it is the most impactful. First of all, because it includes design. I do have strong concerns that if we do material caps, we are eliminating the impact of design, of architecture, of structural engineers, of looking at a whole system approach. And anyone can correct me if I have a wrong understanding of that, but what we're saying on a material cap is you have a final design. And take the wood products industry, for example, you're saying that LVL, this is your size, this is your volume, and now you're just comparing LVL manufacturers against each other. You're not substituting for glue lam, you're not substituting for steel, you're taking that mechanism away to realize savings. Now, the report that was done for the council, for the legislature technically, goes into that and says, well, we get it. This is a proxy. It gets us partially the way there. And that's done all the time in code and legislation. You don't have to do the most complicated holistic thing. You do part of it because that gets you, going in the right direction. So I get it. I think the question becomes, why are we trying to create an easier button for design teams? And I hear that all the time. I don't think that's what we should be doing. I think we should be focused on how you reduce emissions, and the legislature should weigh in heavily on what those targets should be. So I also get nervous about putting any number in there to compare against, because it implies that we are advising over that 3-year cycle. That number can be changed, but we just have to be clear that would be the intent, that every 3 years that number would be evaluated against other policies, and also, like we do in the energy code, we step down. And so every 3 years we have a target to 2031, every 3 years, we evaluate where we are and how we're doing, and how the bundled solutions in the energy code are doing, and are we on track to a certain target? And none of that is established here. So finally, I'll comment on the reuse. I just think it's unnecessary. It's a whole other, process. We're not collecting any data, so forth. The reuse is captured in a whole building LCA, and there's 2 sections in there. If you pull it up, maybe we should be looking at the thing we're talking about, if that's possible, Dustin. CLF, I believe, already recommended that in the whole building LCA that you make sure it's very clear that you're not capturing A1 through A3 of the existing materials that are in the building. So it should already win. That's my point. And so why would we create an exception to not do it? And then I will note in there, if we were to go down this path, there's some footnotes I forgot to strike out, but that's not, important. So go up a little bit, or I'm sorry, keep going down. I guess the whole building LCA is the next section, right? Okay, right there, section 6, that reuse and salvage, that makes it very clear that stages A1 through A4 are not, of the existing building, are not included. But I'd love to hear from experts on whether that really captures what I'm saying. And then biogenic carbon is just, that's kind of standard practice now. That's reported separately. The last thing I'll say is from a product standpoint, if you go back up to the material caps, there aren't PCRs for all the different stages, and I'm happy to share, like, from the wood industry, and I was trying to go over there are different definitions in the state of Washington that we use for B&O taxes primarily, so forth. But I was trying to use it as, I'll give you, like, timber means standing trees, standing or fallen trees in the forest. Timber products means a whip, a log, a veneer, or something else like that. You can do an LCA on that level, but there's not a PCR for that. And then you go to wood products like lumber, so forth, usually things that are commodity or engineered wood products, so forth. And
will you spell out PCR?
Product category rules. So
Okay.
you take an LCA and how you write an EPD,
Okay.
and they're not harmonized, and everybody, that's well known, and they'll get better and better, but they're not harmonized between materials yet. Steel just released their new one, and it's a very good PCR, and it starts to get into specificity of along the supply chain, and the other ones don't yet, but they'll get there. And so if you scroll down, I'm just using wood as an example, and just is the one I know best. Like was said here, is CLT is not in there. It can get added in the new 2025 baselines from CLF, but go back up to the table. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wood piece right there.
Oh, sorry.
Every one of those is, there are different PCRs for how you establish the EPD and so forth, and they're hard to compare to each other. So I'm saying a lot of things that a lot of people on this call already know, but I just wanted to get those topics out.
Anybody go ahead and raise hands. I will suggest that I don't agree with the document only being a whole building LCA or an LCA. We can define what whole building describes. I agree there is some wording that needs to be figured out about documentation and decision-making process. My understanding of this, at least the intent of this proposal, is that the design team is the one that determines which compliance pathway we're going to go down. If the design team is designing something and they're keeping 45% of the structure or whatever, however we define that, you're done. You don't have to go any further. It is a motivation for people to reuse if they can, and I think that is a positive thing. If the design team decides to go through a whole building LCA or an LCA of some sort, then the product compliance pathways really are not required. You need to get EPDs submitted so that you can finalize an LCA. But the work on the contractor side, other than providing the EPDs, is done, and that is, the work is covered by the design team, whether that is a design professional, specific embodied carbon full building LCA consultant, or whether it is done by the architect, by the structural engineer. So I feel like it's important, assuming this proposal is adopted in some municipality, that there are multiple pathways that people can take to meet the requirements of this appendix, if they are required to do so. So I feel rather strongly to keep all three options and recognize that they are options. They're not, you need to meet all three of these. I believe the language is pretty clear. It is, you pick one, and when I say you, I believe that it is the design team that is picking that. And ultimately, if an LCA is not done, or you're not reusing, if you've not met those, then the construction documents need to say you need to meet this criteria according to the product compliance pathway, and yes, that needs to be considered when the projects are bid. So I feel like keeping the three options is an important and less restrictive. There are more options, and in fact, under the current proposal, I think Representative Brewer mentioned the carbon, just a carbon budget. I believe we have a current embodied carbon budget in this. I think that it is 500 kilograms per square meter. 103.4, 103 well, I don't know the numbers because I'm looking at Todd's marked up, but full building compliance pathway, item 1, just an absolute reduction requirement. If you're under 500 kilograms, you meet the criteria. You don't need to go further. So it's almost, you could almost break that out that there are 4 pathways. Right now, it's kind of a full building compliance has an A and a B option. So, and I think it's important for design teams and project teams to have multiple ways that they can meet this requirement. So, Aria, I'm going to go ahead and let you comment.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, and I agree with a lot of these comments. Also agree, Todd, with your note that whole building LCA really does have the potential to maximize the potential for carbon reductions. I think down the line, we might even support a whole building LCA only code proposal. The 3 pathways at this point is kind of an acknowledgement of where the marketplace is today. You know, in order to have to ensure the quality of a whole building LCA, you have to have quality EPDs on the market that feed into it. So the kind of goal with the prescriptive path, which really I think is a goal we share with the Buy Clean Act, is really to promote a focus on increasing the availability and quality of EPDs on the market. So maybe one day all teams could kind of choose a whole building LCA pathway. I personally just think it's a little early for that. In regards to the cap we've set, that was something we looked into based on the best data that was available to us at the time. I also am amenable to providing a little bit more commentary and research on that number. Since we've, proposed this, CLF has come out with a really great and robust report on almost 300 whole building LCAs, which I think could factor into maybe a revisit on that cap. I'm amenable to that if the committee find that useful. And the third thing is, I think you had a question about the reuse being credited in the whole building LCA section. I believe the distinction there is that credits reuse of materials and products, whereas the pathway looks at reuse at the building scale, which is why that would just kind of exempt those projects from the rest of this appendix. So I'll end there, and if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Todd, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ariel, and I'll also I want to really acknowledge the amount of work that you know, both your organization and CLF are doing on this. So I want to by no means take anything that I'm saying as criticism of that. So I raised a couple of points last session that I think could be ways we, you know, and we put that matrix in. Maybe I'd like to see if we're going to pull that back up, you know, to frame our conversation. We can probably pull this, looking at this table down. Couple comments, you know, I have questions of where we exempt stuff in the code. I think we need to understand precedents in the code where we just don't do something, you know, and because something is given a pass. Now, that being said, if you put a certain process in the code, there should be lots of ways to do off ramps, you know, exceptions, we would call them, you know, to address the current reality of practice or of the supply chain. So again, my concerns are that we're trying to, this could be perceived as using the code to try to, you know, influence, you know, the value chain of decisions along the value chain. Okay, but I can say that the value chain, the supply chain is far more advanced than what is, you know, is being proposed as a tool right here. Decisions are already being made, you know, large capital expenditures, so forth are already, you know, EPDs are not a new, and LCAs are not a new reality for the value chain. I was just at a very large global company this week, and the decision making on their investments based on LCAs is inspiring and substantial. So it's already both market driven and none of that was related to actual regulation in any state or local jurisdiction. So again, I come back to I do understand where professional practice is right now, but I'm also not sure they need that path, that option. I think they are evolving quickly, and we heard last time some good testimony that architects and engineers, you know, can and will be ready by the time this is actually implemented. So, thank you.
Corey, I'll get to you. Dustin, can you post this document that you have shown on each meeting so we can pull it up? I'm trying to find it, and I know that it is in a different.
Yeah, it was posted for our last meeting, but I can get it posted for every meeting moving forward.
Okay. And where is it found?
Right now it's online at the last meeting page, and it might be a little cumbersome to get there through straightforward clicking on the SBCC website.
Oh, I'll try to find it, but Corey, go ahead.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks for letting us comment into this. I think one of the things that we've been discussing as an industry and as a coalition behind the scenes since I think this initially came out in November with that report, and then some language came out in code with the proposal. So it's been several months, almost 8 months that we've been talking about this, and we're still learning that there's a lot of data, a lot of information that still needs to come forward. There's a lot of studies still happening. So my discussion points from very early on that this was probably a little premature, especially for Washington, because we have a nuanced, very importation heavy state. We're not producing a whole lot in this state for various reasons, and across market. So I am concerned that we would unintentionally or with unintended consequences create a material preference just based on Washington's market and the way it behaves. There's studies happening, there's data research happening, not even just with the 1282 working group. We hosted a low carbon symposium last week and brought in experts that all have varying ideas on how to get to where we need to get. But they all stated that putting something in code just to get it into code or to get something done is probably not the best way to do it, because there's still a lot of work to be done. So there's advancements happening, there's innovations happening, there's new products coming on the market, and I just really want to caution everybody on how this is done and how we get there, because there's still a lot of unknowns with PCRs between materials aren't compared, EPDs are different, and how they're calculated aren't compared. And so ultimately you're going to get to a point where you have a end user who's using a material to create their product, and they're going to be restricted and limited on what they can procure to even generate. So you can look at precast industry as an example on the concrete side. If we get this ratcheted down to certain percentages that the suppliers have to meet, and that regional product isn't available, they're going to be limited on who they can even use as their supplier, and we're unintentionally going to create a bifurcated market and eliminate the competition. So Matt's concerns, Todd's mentioned a few things. I think this would be indicative that there's still a lot of work that could be happening here, and there's a lot of solutions that could be considered that we're not considering because we just don't know. So that's all I want to say.
Sorry, I was muted. Are there other comments? Trying to get us moved in the direction of making decisions. I'm going to suggest that we vote yay or nay on whether we limit this proposal to a whole building LCA of some sort, or maintain the three options. I will suggest that all three, there is wording. There are many other issues that we would need to address if we maintain the three options, or even if we just limit it to the whole building LCA. So I guess I am going to ask for a motion to do one or the other, either head towards only the whole building LCA, or to maintain all three options. Odd.
Well, and that was if we zoom in on the code intent section of this. I don't remember if this is the last version we were working on, because I thought we added a column in there, but remember we broke out these three different rows here to talk about each one individually, and perhaps make that type of motion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, that's actually why I was looking for that, to make sure I understood the context of how we addressed issues. So yes, let's make a decision or move forward on these opinions or considerations.
And Dustin, do you still have the version that we worked on online last time?
The version of the proposal or
the matrix here?
Matrix.
I should have it. I know that there were some issues with me creating the table in here and having it work out for me while I was working online. Give me one moment and I will try to pull that up.
Okay.
Yeah, I still haven't been able to find the matrix, so.
I haven't either. I looked through all the meeting stuff from last meeting.
So this is the one that I have going on. I don't have an additional column in here. I think I pulled that out. If there's a column in here in this opposition letter section, but it wasn't lining up, and I think I may have removed it right at the end there. So if we want to add a column to this table to move for making decisions on this one.
I was moving down to the code intent, and I was kind of wanting at this point to go back and look at we had the two letters from the legislators.
I put that last column in there so that in this kind of process, you would make a decision in that last column. If you scroll up to the top, I proposed
the
actions that could be possible. We can keep going all the way to the
let's-
top.
Let's move forward with the code intent and the actions. We will take action, and you can make comments or
Dustin?
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
sorry, Chair. Can you go up to the top? I propose what those actions could be. We can change this if you want, but no action on, so if something's not persuasive, again, these aren't my opinions and they shouldn't be. These are trying to capture consideration, and then we say no action, persuasive. It's persuasive. It doesn't mean that that's locked in. It means that we should move forward on evolving and amending the submitted petition in that direction.
I'm confused, Todd, on how you think we will move forward. I think that my hope is we make a decision.
Well, so if you go down to what we were just talking about,
so
we can take any one of these and talk about it individually and say, for example, with Q 103.3, strike the product compliance pathway. So that's the question. Is that persuasive?
Okay.
No. So if not, take no action. That means we're retaining the amendment as submitted.
Okay. But don't we need to have an action of, yes, we accept that? Positive? I don't think that you have it's either open or.
Well, it's just open because we're talking about it right now.
Okay.
If it's persuasive that we should do that, then let's put persuasive substantial, because that's a big change. If we're just editorial, like add a comma, right?
So the first one is really the three-prong approach. Do we limit to an LCA code framework? So you're suggesting that first column or row is what we have been talking about with your.
Yeah, that's the big question. Yep.
So I would ask for us to take an action on this. Do we think that it is appropriate or persuasive argument to limit the LCA to only an LCA framework? And again, as chairman, I don't know that I can make motions, but I want us to, as a committee, we can continue to discuss it, but I'm hoping that we can start making a decision about, do we do the three pathways or not, which also includes the second column, which is striking out the product compliance pathways.
So Roger, you can make motions, but there's a bit more of a process than just making a motion. You would have to relinquish the chair for the time being that motion is open on the table to someone else. And so it's possible, but there's more to it than just making a motion.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to force the committee other than to continue to make progress.
Okay. I think we can simply, start talking about that Q 103.3.
Angela, you've got your hand up.
I guess I'd just like to say for myself that I don't know that I have an opinion on any of these pathways, because after listening to everything and looking at some other stuff and everything, I honestly don't think this is ready for the code, and I'm not in favor of just putting something in to put something in just to get, a foothold or whatever. So So yeah, so I don't particularly have an opinion on whether 1 or 3 of these should be included. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I agree with that. I've said that before. You know, I think the item right underneath 103.5 needs to be an integral part of all of this, and it's not yet. And so, you know, again, for that reason, I'm kind of opposed to this going into code at all yet. I think it's got a place at some point, just not yet.
Okay, Dan?
I agree with the last two, that I don't think it's ready yet. Not ready to make a decision just to put something into code. If we're going to put something into code, I think it needs to be, well, in my opinion, I need to be, if I'm going to vote for it, I need to think it's done right. And I think we have a lot more work to do before we get there.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've expressed my opinion. I believe it belongs in the code somehow, but I think we need to work with the legislature and with commerce and find a coordinated path to do that. And what I would suggest, if there aren't the votes for the petition as presented, that last action there is that opportunity to say, if we were to work with the legislature in the interim right now and bring forward our knowledge of the rulemaking process and of this topic, then if it's the will of the legislature next session, then they could put that a mandate in for that other pathway for code for rulemaking. So we'd be through this year in the external in the triennial external petitions, and we'd have the opportunity to start doing that work off cycle.
Okay.
Is that kind of a precursor to a motion to not adopt this into any of the whole appendix into code this year? Is that kind of where we're headed? If it is,
the proper way to work through it is for somebody to make a motion, and if there's a second, and then we have discussion, and we can, you know.
Well, I'll make a motion that we don't adopt this as any part of the code this cycle.
Or
Okay.
appendix. Or appendix.
Or
Yeah,
appendix.
Yeah,
Right.
let's be clear. Okay,
Yeah.
second from Angela. I'm gonna ask for any other discussion. Todd, go ahead.
Well, like I said, I would support if we were to amend the petition. I don't necessarily want to vote to not include it in. So, but it sounds like there might already be the votes to carry this. So I'm not opposed to that action.
Angela?
Yeah, I just think before we approve any proposal, whether it's an optional appendix or anything like that, I think that Commerce needs to complete their legislative mandated action, get all that done. The most current reports on products, everything like that need to be implemented into this, and then it can move forward as a quality optional appendix that can actually be adopted and used by jurisdictions in the intent that the code or that the state has.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it wouldn't serve a good purpose right now, just being kind of a best practices white paper, you know, or something like that, you know, can still be used in the industry, but just not a part of something that's enforceable that you have to do. at this point.
Angela, your hand's still up. I think you're done. Amy?
Yes, it's okay for interested parties to comment right now?
You are one of the proponents,
Yeah.
I believe, so
Right,
yes.
yes, of course, yeah, I didn't introduce myself before. Amy Lewis with New Buildings Institute, the proponent. I would urge the committee to vote against the motion to not proceed with the proposal. I believe there a lot of thought and collaboration has gone into it, and it deserves the opportunity for the technical requirements that have been suggested and that NBI is open to incorporating. I think that it's not really fair to say that it's not ready to be introduced as a voluntary appendix in light of the fact that there's some clear direction, some clear technical comments and suggestions that can still be incorporated. Also, it's my understanding that Commerce wouldn't say, don't proceed with provisions in the building code. Their research and development of policy is parallel and not in conflict with this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Corey and Matthew, I'm fine making a comment, although I'm trying to limit it to proponents and committee members, but I will go ahead and allow you guys to offer your comments if they can, be quick.
Thanks, Roger. I'll make it really quick. I just wanted to say that I agree with Angela's take and her discussion points that there's a lot of room for further education, discussion, and policy work to take place. We are very interested in being a part of that and being a proactive approach to stakeholdering, where we were excluded from the process beginning with the report. I think it would be great for us to be involved in the interim with legislature and this group. Thank you.
And Matt, before I'm waiting to offer my thoughts, I want to remind everybody and try not to let emotion get involved here, but for anybody to say that they have not been involved in the process, that's I will try to say this as nicely as possible. That's on you. We have been publicly discussing this process for the last 9 months. NBI has consistently said, we are happy to work with any stakeholders. I could go back through the recordings and we could find multiple times when the proponent has said, we're happy to meet with anybody, and they have talked with a whole lot of stakeholders. So to make the comment that you've been blocked out of the process, I think is completely incorrect. The process we've done here, both at the BFRW and the TAG, was open, was run by public open meetings. We have had many, many opportunities for people to offer their opinion. So to suggest that you've been blocked out, I almost take personal offense to. Beyond that, I want to remind everybody, the TAG went through similar discussions, unanimously approved to forward this proposal onto the council. The council unanimously, I'm going to couch it as approved this, but ask for additional input. And in fact, ask for additional technical input in my opinion. So I question whether legally or from a parliamentarian decision, if we can actually say it's not ready. I suppose we can make that recommendation to the council if this committee so chooses to do so, but yeah, I just want to remind you, the TAG approved it unanimously. The council, I think it was a unanimous vote, said, yes, we think this proposal should move forward, but please do some additional public input. So I wanted to remind everybody of that. Matthew.
All I was going to say is that from our perspective, we support the motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd?
Okay, so I think with the motion at hand, I think I'll oppose it to document that there's still willingness to work on this proposal. So just to be clear, so I think it's going to carry, sounds like 3-1 and with or without the chair's vote. My understanding, if that happens, this then will still go forward with a recommendation from this committee to the council. What it will look like is in a spreadsheet where then it got to this stage at the committee, and there'll be a red box there saying this is not recommended to that the council move this forward into CR 102 rulemaking. It doesn't technically mean it's dead, and I'm not trying to open, keep a position open there, but it's not the same as under our new statute for the tag, that if the tag votes to deny it, that it is the council cannot hear it. Where I'm going with that is, I think regardless, I think there's a need, and I'm willing to continue to work with stakeholders on developing better code, and more importantly, aligning with the legislature and with Commerce. I don't necessarily agree that we have to wait for Commerce's work to be done. I think they all need to run in parallel, and they're as you see on that bottom line there, we need to establish the roadmap and have an actual strategy of when this would be implemented and what everyone's role is in this. So thank you.
Okay, Ariel, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, just one thing to add. I want to reiterate that and acknowledge Todd's comment or caveat to keep continuing to work on this. We're again, yeah, happy to collaborate. And in that spirit, I think maybe this is a question, if, however this vote goes, will the draft still go out for public comment, and will a broader range of stakeholders and the broader public be able to weigh in on the draft? I think it's made it this far, and the SBCC did approve it. And I want to keep the option open for the public to be able to weigh in on this draft as well.
Todd, do you want to reply?
Ariel, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding of this, but this will, whatever the action here is, will move forward to the council to take action, right? This is a recommendation, this committee, and the council will take action, I believe, at our July 3rd, is that the next meeting, on what to do with, they'll receive this recommendation, and then they'll either support it or override it to move into rulemaking. So I'm not trying to keep that door open. I'm just saying that's technically what's going to happen.
I just want to correct for people, Todd, our next council meeting, I think, is on the 25th of July.
We have one published for the 25th of July, but we have one coming up this next week. And after today's meeting, first thing on Monday next week, we'll be seeing council's stuff coming out for this upcoming meeting on the 3rd. And Roger, I know you're not available for that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and sorry, I guess that's a question. These are the two remaining group 1 petitions, right? The EV and this?
Correct.
So maybe I'm wrong. The council's not going to actually consider it until July 25th.
We could postpone it to July 25th on that one. We had one scheduled for today that we moved out because we had some conflicting meetings here. And then as we move these out, if we want to hold this at July 25th's meeting, I'm not opposed to that as well. But I was trying to keep this one moving in an expeditious manner. But if we need some more time for public consumption, I'm not opposed to holding it until July 25th.
Okay.
Any other comments? I kind of think, Todd, that the final approval of the CR 102 is at the July 25th meeting. So, and I think that it would be up to you as the council chair and or Dustin to set the agenda for the July 3rd. So it seems to be more appropriate to discuss it at the council level on the July 25th. But okay. Well, any other comments? I think, Dustin, we need to have a roll call vote.
All right, are we ready to pull the roll call right now?
I think so.
All right. Todd Bayreuther.
No.
Dan Young.
Yes.
Angela Haupt.
Yes.
Katie Sheehan is not here. Tom Handy.
Yes.
And with that, the motion carries.
Okay. Is it possible for me as the chair to register my vote as a no?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I would like to do that. Okay. Well, that basically gets us through agenda item number 5. Item number 6 is other business. Is there any other business?
No, sir.
Okay, I will just remind everybody, we do still have a meeting on July 2nd. At this stage, we have the EV charging proposal. We don't have any other work. I guess I would propose people, would it be better for us to finalize the EV on the July 3rd date, or we also have a meeting set for July 18th?
I believe we also have a BFRW set for July 18th as well. That was kind of the last meeting where we were going to try to final approve everything we've got going on to
Yes.
that last one.
At this point, Dustin, I think if we made final decisions on July 3rd, it would help you. You guys need to write CR 102s, et cetera.
Yes.
So I'm going to suggest we keep the July 2nd. What I would also ask Dustin, if you can summarize, there was some correlation items that we went through going back to our first meetings, and I've got to remind myself. So a summary of all of the different actions we've taken, just to clarify, and then I think the final action, so that everybody's aware of it, and we can all understand what we've done. And the final action will be to take care of the EV charging. So hopefully we can do that at the next July 2nd meeting. Tom?
Yeah, did I think some of the outstanding items on that EV were some correlation issues too? Were those going to be taken care of before the meeting, or did we decide how those were going to work with the conduits, the raceways and those types of things?
I believe me and Todd are going to kind of address those and make sure that we're bringing the IECC, NEC, and all the definitions together, at least to have a discussion and decide what we're going to run with on those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
The notes that I had is keep the definition updates, go
Yep.
back to the old table and exceptions. Coordinate, however, the IECC appendix versus the the electrical code. So make sure when we do the definitions that we're comfortable that we're picking the correct one, and confirming that everything in there is that it's for provided, not required. So there might be some edits in the document to confirm that it is for provided, not required.
That aligns with my notes as well.
Okay, Angela?
Yeah, I just wanted to say for the July 2nd meeting, I will be attending, but I will be traveling, so I may have some connection issues on and off.
Okay. I will be attending from my vacation, so. All right, with that, I think we will adjourn the meeting.
All righty. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. It's a long held discussion, and I think we're making good progress, and there's more discussion ahead still. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.